Story time. It's 5 o'clock on a Tuesday, and I'm casually writing and revising a script about the Warlock class and the discard mechanic. I idly check Reddit and notice Year of the Raven. Huh. So that Warlock script is getting archived. You can expect to see a video on it in maybe, mid-July. Greetings and welcome to Hearthstone Theory, the show whose maker will casually notice a new Hearthstone announcement and then drop everything they're doing to create a quick video about it. Just last Tuesday, Blizzard announced the Year of the Raven and the new Hall of Fame announcements, and I'm equal parts excited and annoyed. After all, I've done a couple of prediction videos on the Hall of Fame, two of my more watched and controversial videos, and it feels like Blizzard has looked at my arguments, laughed in my face, and hit me with the famings of Ice Block, Cold Light Oracle, and Molten Giant. However, more frustrating was Blizzard's lack of explanation on each of these cards in terms of game design. Seriously, I could spend a whole paragraph explaining what Blizzard says in one sentence. Detrimental to class identity. What does that even mean? The lack of explanation honestly frustrated me so much that I barely noticed the announcements about quest reworkings, tournaments, and the new expansion being announced this Friday. So today, I'll be doing Blizzard a favor and examining these three cards and why the choice was made for each of them. Let's begin! To my regular viewers, you know that I have come to the defense of Ice Block in the past. However, a point that I failed to properly flesh out was that my stance was just one side of the argument, and that there is a perfectly reasonable stance to be had against Ice Block as a card. So, now here I am, and I'm going to adequately explain that other stance. Hyper angry Reddit user, this is for you. As I previously covered, Ice Block offers variable anti-aggression that is dependent on your opponent's board state at the time of its activation. It can be next to useless, being worth the same as 1 health, or it can be stronger than Reno Jackson. The exact strength is dependent on the choices that your opponent makes. At least, that's how it seems on the surface. Decks that use Ice Block specialize in one thing, drawing specific cards that can exterminate the opponent in 1 or 2 turns. Freeze Mage and Exodia Mage use cards that halt your opponent's aggression, then use cards like Pyroblast, Alexstrasza, or the Antonidas combo to win games very quickly. I have previously argued that Ice Block isn't the problem here. The powerful, aggressive cards are the ones that provide too much issue in the game. However, it's important to note that these two effects go hand in hand. The powerful defense enables the powerful offense, and the powerful offense requires the powerful defense. Blizzard has decided to weaken the defensive tools of Mage decks in order to quell this dichotomy. To that end, Ice Block has the greatest fluctuation of power in comparison to Mage's other freeze cards. It's this great power it sometimes wields that makes it the target card to eliminate. We'll see if Arcane Artificer and other defensive cards will be able to save Freeze Mage, but that'll be a story only once the Year of the Raven begins. Until then, let's move on. Drat. I really liked my Kingsbane Rogue with the Spider Spawner in it. Cold Light Oracle has always been an interesting card, one of the few your opponent draws a card effects. The general strategy for this card is simple. Either hope your card draw is more important than your opponent's card draw, or get your opponent to have a full hand and thus burn their deck. Burning cards on the surface seems to do nothing in regards to my analysis methods, but in reality it has the effect of providing delayed aggression, specifically when there are no cards left in the deck. This is due to fatigue damage that happens at the end of the game, under the condition that you make it to the end of the game. This made Cold Light Oracle at home in mill decks, which made burning decks and lasting a long time a winning strategy. Blizzard claims it has 2 reasons for removing Cold Light from standard play, it being neutral card draw and its milling effect. The neutral card draw I feel is an irrelevant point. By itself, Cold Light Oracle will never be strong enough to build a deck around, since the opponent gets the card draw as well, and more mana to spend on those cards. Still, this statement by Blizzard implies that they believe certain classes shouldn't have access to card draw effects, which seems odd but understandable. However, this argument is the much less relevant point. The true problem that Blizzard is concerned with is the burn effect. Translate Cold Light Oracle as this. If your opponent has 10 cards, draw 2 cards and remove 2 from your opponent's deck. This seems very strong for a very specific case, which is where most strong cards come from. Blizzard has decided that this strong case is too strong, and that simple effects such as returning the minion to your hand increases the odds of this strong case coming to pass. Notably, we can start to notice a pattern with these Hall of Fame entries. Both are cases that are extremely powerful in very specific circumstances, such as when an opponent is playing a 1-turn kill combo deck. I'll touch on that more later. Until then, onwards. Molten Giants. An interesting case to say the least. A 0 mana 8/8 that can only be played at low health. a classic case of strong tempo but very, very low but variable flexibility. By nature, this card is once again a very strong card, but only in very specific circumstances, continuing to set the trend with this year's Hall of Fame. The nerf of Molten Giant was an interesting one. It being best played at 10 health before and then at 5 health made a significant difference. 5 health may not seem like much, but for this case it had the amount of aggression that your opponent needed to generate to defeat you. And while 10 damage is hard to scrape together, 5 damage is relatively simple. So this card's flexibility tanked, and it became unusable in most cases. Was this necessary? Yes. The key for these giants is that they are strong tempo for low flexibility, but Molten Giant was too flexible for classes such as Warlock. However, Wild has the luxury of being more willing to have these grand swings of power appear more often, which is probably why Ice Block and Cold Light Oracle are allowed to exist in that format. Blizzard is returning Molten Giant back to form, with the condition that it can only be in Wild decks. This places this famous card into the Hall of Fame, which honestly makes it probably the most fitting entry since Ragnaros. So, with these 3 cards being added to the Hall of Fame, how do I feel? Honestly, disappointed. I personally find nothing more frustrating in a game than when an opponent suddenly defeats you, their master deck plan coming together to spawn 7 Doom Guards to defeat you, or 4 Sorcerer's Apprentices and Archmage Antonidas. There's no reaction, there's no counter, there's just losing. Ice Block and Cold Light Oracle provide significant power swings, but they did it in a way that was unusual, providing immunity and burning your opponent's deck. While I can understand how these unique effects can limit card design in the future, I also see how it removes unique decks right now. Freeze Mage and Mill decks are now completely unviable, thanks to the exit of these cards. I predicted that Blizzard would remove cards such as Antonidas, Leroy Jenkins, and Doomguard because of these opportunities to do overwhelming damage. Instead, those cards are untouched, which suggests to me that Blizzard does not mind effects that end games quickly and with little setup on the board. And that disappoints me. I want games to be interactive and challenging, and not a case of racing my opponent to put together our puzzle pieces faster. Perhaps I'm overthinking this. Blizzard may simply desire to slow the game down, and are therefore removing Ice Block and Cold Light to stop 2 cornerstone anti-control decks. All 3 of these cards are incredibly powerful in the right circumstances, and only those circumstances. It's likely that Blizzard is simply moving cards of that manner over to the Hall of Fame. Right now we're only looking at a small portion of Blizzard's strategy, trying to gauge what they're planning outside of it. Perhaps the removal of these cards will prevent creativity, or perhaps they're freeing up the game to have even more creative options down the line. Time will tell. Finally, the expansion announcement is almost here. I'm looking forward to providing more content as new cards get announced, so if you're interested, subscribe such that you don't miss it. Also, I finally set up a Patreon. If you feel like supporting me there, feel free. If not, no stress. No matter what you decide, smile on the just, and I will see you all next time.